And it's not just retailers who are worried about the president's trade war with China. News Nation's Xavier Walton is live at the Dallas Farmers Market.
This is a map that shows the impact of tariffs on farmers across the country.
So, corn, agricultural product coming into America, and our farmers starting on April 2nd. It may be a little bit of an adjustment period.
Over 40,000 family farms across the United States have shut down since the government implemented sweeping trade tariffs. Let that number sink in. These aren't corporate entities or multinational agribusinesses. These are generational farms passed down through blood, sweat, and legacy. They represent the backbone of rural America, the source of our food, and a deeply rooted part of national identity. And yet in less than 2 years, tens of thousands have vanished from the map, closed, sold, or foreclosed under pressure they never stood a chance against. This collapse didn't come from a drought, a pandemic, or a supply chain breakdown. It came from policy, deliberate, aggressive, and ultimately devastating. When the government imposed tariffs as a tool in a broader trade war, it turned American agriculture into a bargaining chip. Key trading partners like China responded swiftly with retaliatory tariffs, slashing imports of U.S. agricultural goods. Markets evaporated overnight. Contracts were canceled. Livelihoods disappeared. The toll has been brutal. In states like Iowa, Illinois, and Minnesota, silos are full, but there are no buyers. Farmers are dumping milk, laying off workers, and abandoning land they've cultivated for decades. As global buyers shift to cheaper alternatives from Brazil or Australia, the American farmer is left behind, priced out, boxed in, and pushed under. And while this crisis may seem rural or remote, its impact is already reaching millions of Americans. Grocery store prices are soaring. Staples like bread, meat, and dairy are climbing out of reach for working families. Shortages are emerging not because demand has changed, but because the systems that once delivered abundance have fractured. This isn't just economic fallout, it's a national unraveling. And if it feels like your weekly grocery bill has doubled, you're not imagining it. That's the sound of 40,000 silent farm closures echoing across the country all the way to your dinner table. Grocery stores across America are changing not gradually, not by market trends, but by external force. Once predictable aisles are now uncertain terrain. Where there used to be rows of stocked shelves, shoppers now encounter empty sections, buy me, and out-of-stock signs. Staples like eggs, milk, beans, and rice items that once seemed immune to disruption are becoming less reliable, more expensive, or simply unavailable. These aren't luxury goods. These are basic building blocks of everyday meals. The cause? It's not panic buying or a temporary supply hiccup. It's a structural shift. The ongoing impact of trade restrictions, rising input costs for producers, and the lingering logistical challenges have collided in a perfect storm. Retailers are struggling to maintain inventory consistency, especially for items that rely on either imported ingredients or foreign production systems, which according to USDA data includes a significant portion of fruits, vegetables, seafood, and processed goods. For consumers, the experience is disorienting. Shoppers are increasingly leaving stores with less than they plan to buy, not because of personal budget cuts, but because products simply aren't there. And when they are, they cost more. The total on the receipt climbs steadily even when carts are less full. In many households, that translates to immediate sacrifices, skipping non-essential items, cutting back on protein, or stretching meals across more days. Parents are rethinking how to pack lunches. Seniors are budgeting between medication and groceries. While this hits everyone, the impact is disproportionately harsh on low-income families. These households spend a greater share of their income on food, often rely on affordable staples that are now rising in price, and have limited access to large-scale discount retailers, particularly in rural areas or food deserts. When prices rise or supply shrinks, these families are the first to feel the pinch and the last to recover. What begins as a pricing issue quickly becomes a nutritional one. Across rural America, farmers are waking up to a harsh reality, not of bad harvests or weather disasters, but of policy-driven collapse. Entire livelihoods are unraveling, not because farmers made poor choices, but because they were systematically placed in the crosshairs of a geopolitical conflict. As the United States ramped up aggressive trade policies, particularly under the return of Trump-era tariffs, major trade partners responded in kind. China, once the single largest buyer of USE, agricultural exports retaliated with a 34% tariff on American goods, a move that swiftly shattered export contracts for soybeans, pork, corn, wheat, and dairy. The impact was immediate and unforgiving. Markets that once sustained entire regions vanished overnight. In Iowa, silos are full, but there's no one to buy the grain. In Illinois, meat processors are scaling back operations, laying off workers. In Wisconsin and Minnesota, farmers are pouring out thousands of gallons of unsellable milk because there is simply nowhere for it to go. It's not that the world doesn't need these products, it's that the cost of getting them into those markets is now too high, and in many cases, prohibitively so. And for these farmers, this isn't just a business downturn, it's existential. Many operate on razor-thin margins already stretched by inflation in equipment, fertilizer, and fuel. When export income disappears, there's no cushion left. Farm loans come due, equipment sits idle. Families who've worked the same land for generations now face bankruptcy, foreclosure, or the painful decision to sell everything and walk away. The most painful truth: once a foreign market is lost, it's rarely regained. Buyers move on, supply chains reorient. Competitors from Brazil to Australia step in without hesitation, and America's farmers are left holding the bill, watching their decades of work evaporate into policy headlines. The crisis facing American agriculture didn't begin with a drought or a downturn. It began with a pen stroke in Washington. In 2024, the U.S. administration reinstated and expanded sweeping tariffs on foreign goods, targeting a wide range of imports in an attempt to renegotiate trade terms and reclaim economic power. These measures were enacted quickly, aggressively, and crucially without congressional approval. While pitched to the public as a bold stroke of economic nationalism, the fallout was neither strategic nor contained. As legal challenges mounted, the U.S. Court of International Trade ruled that the administration had overstepped its constitutional authority, stating that tariffs imposed under the guise of national security had caused measurable and unjustified harm to domestic producers and global trade partners. But while that decision was hailed by trade experts and economists, the victory was hollow because the tariffs remained in place during the appeals process. And so the damage continued. That damage is most visible in the global marketplace. In the months following the policy shift, long-standing buyers of U.S. agricultural products, particularly China, India, and the European Union, began sourcing their goods elsewhere. Brazil rapidly filled the soybean gap. Australia stepped in to provide beef and wheat. Other nations, some of which had long sought entry into these supply chains, took advantage of America's self-imposed retreat. As foreign contracts were lost, the U.S. surrendered its competitive edge not because of inferior products, but because of self-imposed trade barriers. International buyers are not sentimental. They follow cost consistency and policy stability, none of which America offered under this new tariff regime. And once those contracts are gone, they don't come back easily. Trust in American trade reliability has been shaken, and other countries are moving quickly to lock in long-term alternatives. The world adjusted. America didn't. The result: a domestic farm economy that's isolated, undercut, and collapsing not because it couldn't compete, but because it wasn't allowed to. Tariffs may have been framed as a weapon against foreign exploitation, but in practice, they have acted more like a boomerang, inflicting the deepest wounds, not abroad, but at home. When a farm goes under, the damage doesn't end at the edge of a field. It ripples outward into supply chains, retail shelves, and kitchen tables. Agriculture isn't a self-contained system. It's the foundation of a complex, interconnected web of production, processing, transportation, and distribution. And when that foundation cracks, the tremors are felt everywhere. Major retailers have already begun to issue warnings. Walmart, the largest grocery chain in the country, has publicly cautioned that food prices will continue to rise in the coming months. Their reasoning isn't speculative, it's structural. The cost of doing business, from sourcing ingredients to packaging, shipping, and restocking shelves, is being squeezed at every point. Fertilizers, many of which are imported or depend on international chemical inputs, are more expensive. Packaging materials, some of which come from tariffed regions, now cost significantly more. Even transportation is under strain as fuel prices and logistical delays compound the cost of moving food across the country. But it's not just the big players who are struggling. Small independent grocery stores, especially those in rural towns and immigrant neighborhoods, are facing a crisis of viability. These smaller operations don't have the bargaining power to negotiate bulk discounts or absorb cost increases the way national chains can. They rely on niche suppliers and diverse imports that are now heavily taxed or slow to arrive. As costs rise, so do prices, and customers begin to disappear. In some cases, store owners are forced to choose between raising prices and shutting down entirely. The result is a quiet consolidation where large retailers dominate and local food access deteriorates. Communities already vulnerable to food insecurity are the first to feel the strain. Rural areas lose not only stores, but jobs and access to affordable nutrition. Urban immigrant communities see cultural staples vanish from shelves, replaced by more generic offerings or nothing at all. This isn't just economic attrition. It's erosion of diversity, accessibility, and choice in our food system. And while the headlines may focus on inflation or supply shortages, the deeper story is one of policy-induced imbalance. The tariffs that began as a geopolitical tool are now remapping how and where Americans get their food. It began with farmers, but it won't end there. The consequences of America's trade war aren't confined within its borders. They've cascaded into the global marketplace, where diplomatic ties and economic relationships are fraying under the weight of mistrust, retaliation, and incompatible demands. Once a central player in global agricultural exports, the United States now finds itself increasingly isolated, with former trade partners looking elsewhere, not out of spite, but out of necessity. The European Union, long a complex but valuable trade partner, has taken a firm stand. American negotiators pushed for expanded access to the EU market, particularly for beef and poultry. But Europe has refused to bend on its food safety standards, flatly rejecting U.S. meat treated with hormones or chlorine-based washes, practices banned under EU health regulations. The standoff has stalled broader trade talks, pushing the U.S. further from the European table and weakening its credibility as a negotiator. India, another critical player in global trade, has also drawn a line. In the midst of negotiations over a potential deal, India has refused to lower its tariffs on key food products. Officials there cited the importance of protecting domestic farmers, a statement that resonates deeply in a country where agriculture remains central to both the economy and social stability. For India, giving U.S. food producers preferential access would mean undercutting local livelihoods, a political and economic risk they're unwilling to take. These stalled negotiations reveal a broader trend: America is losing leverage. Aggressive tariff strategies, once intended to pressure other nations into compliance, have instead prompted them to form new alliances, deepen regional supply chains, and cut reliance on U.S. imports. Competitors like Brazil, Australia, and Canada are seizing the opportunity to supply markets America is now priced out of, and they're doing it with fewer strings attached and more diplomatic goodwill. The outcome is clear: the U.S. is not only losing export volume, it's losing trust. And in a global economy built on interdependence, that erosion of trust translates into long-term damage. Markets don't just rebound on command. They're cultivated, earned, and easily redirected when alternatives prove more stable or more respectful of mutual interests. 40,000 farms are gone, prices keep rising, shelves are thinning, and still the policies that triggered it all remain in place. This isn't just economics, it's everyday life. It's your dinner table. And the longer we stay silent, the worse it gets. Speak up, stay informed, and don't just swallow the cost, question it. Because if we don't protect the people who feed us, who will?